I am live. My new book arrived. Doesn't look like much, does it? But it's good. Titled Return to Elysium. And it is one of the Joan Grant novels or books I have not yet read. So I ordered it and was very happy to get a first edition print. And it was published in 1947, in permanent friendship for Alec Clarkson, 29th of June 1906 to 30th of November 1946. Author's note: there are both Greek and Roman characters in Return to Elysium, so to avoid confusion I have used throughout the more familiar Latinized spelling of proper names. Gosh, that'll be a challenge. Part 1. First chapter, The Key. 3 days before my 13th birthday, Elissa told me I was going to a place called Elysium. I was very excited, for I had always lived on the island, and even in clear weather, the Greek mainland was only a blur on the horizon. She did not tell me how many days I was to stay, but I knew it could not be for long, for I had heard her tell Dictys, her husband, that she would leave food for him while we were away. I spent the afternoon explaining to the goats that I would soon be home again, and that while I was gone, they must only obey Dictys and not wonder if he took them to the high pasture. I knew Elissa was my foster mother, but she had never told me before that I had a guardian called Asculapius, who was one of the most famous men in Athens. She kept on reminding me that I must always be polite to him. He's a good man and very clever, Lucina, but he expects people to be obedient, so you mustn't argue as you do. We went down the mountain at night, Dictys striding ahead and Elissa holding me tightly by the hand as though she were afraid I was going to get lost in the dark. If she had known I had often been out alone at night when I was supposed to be asleep, she would not have been so anxious about me. There were lights in the houses of the village street. Through an open door I saw people crowding around a narrow table, wine skins hanging from the rafters. They were singing and looked friendly, so I said I was thirsty, but Dictys only grunted and hurried me past the house. When we reached the harbour, a man carrying a flaring torch came up to Dictys, spoke to him in a low voice, and handed him a small leather sack. I saw Dictys counting coins which shone yellow in the light. The resinous smoke from the torch got into my throat and made me cough. Elissa thought I was cold and told me to put on the woolen cloak which had been woven for me during the winter. Our boat was larger than those which were drawn up on the beach. We were not going to start until dawn, but Elissa and I got into it, and Dictys said goodbye to us, rather gruffly. In the stern there were cushions under an awning, and Elissa made me lie beside her, saying we had better sleep while we had the chance. The waves made a soft sound like butter slapping against the side of a churn. I thought I was too excited to sleep, but woke to see the chief sailor, whose name was Phocion, hauling up the sail. It was red-brown patched with blue and flapped like the wings of an angry bird. The sun was still low in the sky, and the waves were carved with shadow under their crests. When we got outside the harbour, Phocion let me help him steer. Elissa lay huddled under the cloak and moaned when Phocion asked her if she would like something to eat. He gave me a basket of green figs and small purple grapes, and taught me not to spit the pips to the windward. All that day there was only sea and sky to look at, except for 2 small islands which were too far away to be more than shapes, with coloured dots for houses. But next morning we were in sight of Athens. We were close enough to see people, small as ants in the distance, walking in the steep streets. Then we turned westwards along the coast, which was hilly, with no mountains showing through the haze beyond. The wind had changed and was blowing strongly from the land, so we had to go sideways, drawing very slowly nearer to white beaches, which curved among the rocks. There were large houses among groves of trees, and many boats, their sails curved like tulip petals. "We shall soon reach Elysium," said Phocion. Elissa got up from the cushions and staggered towards me. "Don't be frightened," she said. "Everyone in Elysium is kind. You mustn't be frightened of them, Lucina." Until then I had not been at all frightened, and felt shy, because I was not used to Elissa being so affectionate. "Do you know Elysium? Were you happy there?" "Yes," she said slowly, "I was happy in Elysium. Promise me you will be happy." "Of course I shall," I said firmly, and for the first time wondered if I should enjoy being away from the island, even for a few days. "Now you can see the landing steps," said Phocion, pointing to a wide bay protected by jutting headlands. He turned the boat across the wind. It lurched so suddenly that I fell against the mast and grazed my arm, but I was too interested to bother about the sharp hurt of the salt. There was a man on the landing stage. As we came close, I saw he was young and had curly hair. The sail came down with a clatter. Phocion pinioned it as though it were a hen being taken to market. The young man helped me out of the boat. "My name is Cleon," he said. "I'm very glad that you have come to Elysium." I was relieved to see he was so friendly, for now Elissa would stop being worried about meeting strangers. "Elissa," I said without turning around, "Elissa, this is Cleon. He is glad we have come to see him." Elissa was standing beside the mast. Tears were running down her face. Phocion was hauling up the sail. It was only then that I realized she was not coming with me. "Elissa, don't leave me here. Elissa." Already there was a narrow strip of water between the boat and the hard white stone of the quay. I ran, but the water was too wide to jump. "Don't leave me here, please. Don't leave me." The boat bent to the wind. Elissa had to cling to the mast to prevent herself from falling. "I can't help it. Everyone has to do as he says." "Don't leave me." To make her hear, I had to shout until my throat ached. "Don't be unhappy. You promised not to be unhappy." Her voice was brittle against the sound of the sea. I could not see her properly. Everything was blurred, but I knew she was crying too. Elissa had gone away without even telling me why. In sudden terrible loneliness, I clung to Cleon. He wasn't Elissa, but he was better than nothing. He must have known I was crying, yet he said, as though nothing terrible had happened, "There's a rock pool further along the beach with red sea anemones. Shall we go and see them?" I nodded, for I knew my voice would be unsteady, and followed him along a path between high rocks until we came to a stretch of sand. The anemones were interesting. And curled up when I touched them. There were shrimps in the pool too, and a small crab, which Cleon showed me how to catch by dangling my hair ribbon in front of its claws until it hung on and I could pull it out. Further on, we came to more rocks covered in brown seaweed, which popped when I squeezed the pods. "Shall we have a swim?" he said. "I forgot to bring a towel, but we can dry in the sun." I hesitated. He might think me silly if I told him I couldn't swim, but it would be worse if he thought I was afraid. I decided it was necessary to be honest. "I can't swim. I was never allowed to leave the mountain." "Then I will soon teach you," he said kindly. "Leave your things on that rock, and then we won't be sandy when you want them again." Elissa had always been fussy when I went outdoors with no clothes on, but apparently they were more sensible in Elysium. Cleon stood on a rock, waiting to dive. His body looked like gold against the blue sky. His hair was gold too, but darker than mine. He swam out a little way and then turned back to where I had waited for him in the shallow water. It was fun learning to swim, At first he kept his hand under my chin, but later I could take 3 or 4 strokes even without a toe on the bottom. We lay on the hot sand until we were dry. My skin felt sticky with salt, but very clean. Hungry, he said. Very, though I hadn't noticed until now. I thought we would eat by ourselves on your first morning, so I asked Epicurus to send one of the servants down to the pavilion. Who is Epicurus, and what is a servant? Epicurus is one of the men who live here. He looks after the household and chooses the meals. Servants are people who work, cooking and gardening and making clothes. But what does Asculapius do? He is a philosopher. Wonder how long that was. Who is Epicurus and what is a servant? Epicurus is one of the men who live here. He looks after the household and chooses the meals. Servants are people who work, cooking and gardening and making clothes. Then what does Aesculapius do? He is a philosopher. What is a philosopher? Someone who knows the answers to the changeless questions and who remembers that there are always more answers to discover. Are you a philosopher? He laughed. Sometimes I think so, but usually not. Can I learn to be one? That is what he wants to discover, Lucina. That is one reason why he brought you here. What are the other reasons? He is your guardian, which means that as you have no parents, he looks after you instead. I thought it an odd way of looking after someone, not to see her until she was 13, but decided it was wiser not to say so. He is my guardian too, Cleon continued. He adopted me as a son 12 years ago when he left Athens and came to live in Elysium. We had reached the pavilion, which was only a roof supported by 6 slender pillars. Several dishes covered with white napkins were on a stone table, and there was a stone bench with a ram's head carved on the back for us to sit on. It was an absorbing meal, fat prawns to dip in green sauce, slices of chicken with cold asparagus, and small sticky cakes to eat with a cream cheese. Full, said Cleon. Shall we sleep, or would you rather explore? Sleep seemed a waste of time. Explore, if you don't mind. And I'll stop this here. It's the first part of the first chapter. We turn to Elysium.